Welcome, everyone, to Racing America's broadcast of the Alan Turner Snowflake 100, live from Five Flags Speedway in Pensacola, Florida. Today's broadcast sponsored by Hooters, the place to go for hot wings, cold beer, and the world-famous Hooters girls. I'm Dave Moody alongside Alan Dietz and Adam Mackey. It has already, gentlemen, been a very busy week of competition here in Pensacola.
It all started Tuesday night when we had the preview show from Hooters, Allen, and it just picks up and amps up every single day. The busiest day of the week probably is this day, the Saturday, because there's outlaw action on track right now with practice. They have qualifying a little later. They have a feature race tonight. You've got the Snowflake qualifying. You've got the last chance race for the Snowflake. You have their Alan Turner Snowflake race tonight, plus still some qualifying and a last chance race for the Snowball Derby cars. Plenty of action on this Saturday.
Yes, and the thing about it is when we see this practice, you're going to have cars on all sorts of different agendas. You're going to have cars locked into the top 30 last night. They're concentrating on race runs, but then you're going to have those last chance racers. They know they've got 50 laps to race their way into the Snowball Derby. It all starts now with this practice to get these cars where they need them in order to try and race their way in.
The racing equivalent of last call for alcohol. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of teams down there that, and many of them have been here since Wednesday and Thursday turning laps. And I spoke to William Byron last night, and he said, the first run of the week was our best. We've proceeded since then to fine-tune ourselves slower and slower every single time. And he said, and if past history is any guide, by the time we get down to race time, we'll be right back to the original setup that we rolled off the truck with. It's amazing how these teams can think themselves into a corner sometimes.
You know, William Byron didn't actually practice on Thursday. He practiced yesterday during the first session. Elected not to go back out, and I think that's what they didn't want to do, is back themselves up any further. He qualified decent last night, middle of the 30 that qualified into the Snowball Derby. But, yeah, you can definitely, with the different weather each day, too. Look at the weather today. It's about 10 degrees warmer than we've seen the last 2 days that they've been on track, Alan.
Well, that black 54 you see down at the end of pit lane, Matt Craig, they decided and opted to not go that route where they adjust themselves out, just like you said, Dave. They've come here for years. He ended up qualifying fourth last night. They said, we're going to approach this like a regular Saturday night race here. I've talked to teams I've talked to Bubba Pollard years ago, and he said you can end up, if you're not careful, making so many adjustments, you don't even know how to get it back to where it was whenever you first started.
When we all started in this game, some of us back in the Paleozoic era, we used to roll in at noon, practice at 1, qualify at 4, race at 7, and we were on our way home by 10. Since then, particularly in these major national events, it's turned into 2- and 3-day marathons of practice and qualifying. But sometimes the original way of doing business was the smart way. The old ways aren't necessarily the worst ways.
Well, for the better or worse, I mean, they're taking some of these cars now to wind tunnels. They're putting them on rigs to check the chassis out and the setups before they ever hit the racetrack. And as I said, for better or worse, I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. But for these races, whenever they come, they have a pretty good idea of what they need to do. But just as Adam said, you go through so many different weather changes here from the spring to the summer to when we come here at the winter, and then you have all three, which is what we've had. You had winter on Wednesday, you had spring yesterday and Thursday, and today, honestly, it feels like the summer outside.
Well, it's been a very interesting week so far. There's no question about that. It's only going to get more interesting now the closer we get down to showtime. We're happy to provide you this sneak peek into some of the events here at Five Flags Speedway during Snowball Derby weekend. The main events are available on pay-per-view at racingamerica.com. In order to watch the Snowflake 100 and the Snowball Derby, just log on to racingamerica.com and purchase your pay-per-view today.
A little free preview right now for the folks that want to watch some practice. This is the final practice session for the Snowball Derby getting ready to take place. They're going to have 45 minutes on track. And now for 30 competitors, at least 32 actually, they get to go out and work on race runs because they've locked in the 30 top qualifiers last night, plus the 2 provisionals, and Stephen Nasse and Augie Grill get to go out and work on their race setups for tomorrow.
Hey, you know, one of the things, the last time Chase Elliott raced here, if you remember, he was totally out to lunch in practice and qualifying. He was one of the slowest cars in qualifying. Brad Keselowski may be hoping that this same thing works out in the sense that Chase Elliott in that last chance race seemed like they figured something out. He ended up winning it, and I think if I'm not mistaken, they ended up finishing third that day. So, you know, it's a long race. It's 300 laps. These drivers that race their way in, I feel like will have just as good a chance, if not, you know, a little bit extra to know what the racetrack's going to feel like in those race conditions that we'll have here tomorrow afternoon.
You know, there's an old saying in motorsports, particularly when we get to the highest levels of a particular division like we have here this weekend. You don't have to be far off to be far off. There was about a tenth of a second at one point in qualifying last night between 5th and 25th place. And when you've got the last guys in, the promoters' options, if you will, guys like Stephen Nasse and Augie Grill, those are probably the two best promoters' option starters in the history of motorsports. It's amazing how strong this field is top to bottom.
And Nasse making it in via the provisional for the Southern Super Series, Augie Grill for the Blizzard Series points. So they were able to lock in through points. Now 4 more drivers will come through the last chance race. And that last chance race we have coming up later this afternoon, the Snowball Derby qualifier going to take place after 3 o'clock late this afternoon. That's going to be a feature in itself.
Yeah, if you look at some of the starters in that race, Derek Griffith and Jesse Love are going to be on the front row. Michael House, John Bolin on row 2, Derek Krause and Preston Peltier on row 3. But you've got good, strong drivers all throughout this field. Johnny Clark, Brad Keselowski, Brad May, Boris Sherkovic, Hayden Plybon. I mean, there are going to be a lot of good cars that go home.
And when I look at that field, Dave, and I see Derek Griffith and Jesse Love, Alan, you mentioned them being on the front row of that race later, and I look a little further back to Preston Peltier, I think those 3 are likely to take 3 of those 4 spots. If nothing happens to those 3 are going to be the tough ones to beat. You've got one more spot that everyone else is going to be vying for.
These last chance qualifiers traditionally go one of 2 different ways. Either you get 2 or 3 guys that are the class of the field and just kind of pull away, get in single file, run fast laps, and don't let anybody get close enough to them to bother them, or it turns into a bare knuckler or a brass knuckler where everybody's torn up and there are multiple cautions. I don't really have a feeling for the way it's going to go today.
You never really can tell. I think the last couple of years they were pretty clean races, yeah. Maybe a couple mishaps, which would be expected. But despite, and I talked about race setups, the guys that are locked in are going to work on their long-run race setups right now. The guys that are in that last chance race later, they need to work on that 50-lap race setup. And they've got to be fast on the short runs coming up later today because they're probably not going to go 50 laps without a yellow. So they need to be good, almost like a qualifying run, to be quite honest, as they start to get up to speed. And you mentioned him, William Byron, one of the first on track.
He was in Nashville, Tennessee on Thursday night as part of the NASCAR Cup Series awards ceremony here at Five Flags Speedway this weekend. Really liked his race car when I talked to him yesterday. Wasn't quite sure how they were approaching the tires, though. And he told me something that I thought was pretty interesting, that all summer long, particularly in the early season, at the tail end of the pandemic, if you will, they were running on very new tires that had been manufactured within just a few weeks of the time they hit the racetrack. Now they've gotten a little bit ahead in the production. Some of these tires have been sitting in a warehouse for a month or 2, and it really changes the way they react on the racetrack.
And that's a good thing because that was what they were used to prior to the pandemic and the supply chain issues when the tires had not, quote-unquote, cured. And it seemed like the Donnie Wilson Motorsports team hit on something with those tires. Chandler Smith won the Snowball Derby last year, and you look at the success that William Byron's had. He won the Slinger National. Sammy Smith won the Redbud 400. They have been the team to beat, but it does seem like since the All-American 400 and Winchester back in October that the gap has closed just a little bit.
In this strong field, we've seen a couple of very strong competitors on track. You see the Sammy Smith 22 car there. Just moments ago saw Jesse Love, who will be one of the front row starters for the last chance qualifier later today.
Sammy Smith just jumped up to 7th on the practice board here. Fastest lap so far, Jeremy Doss, followed by William Byron. Giovanni Ruggiero. Gio Ruggiero really had a great qualifying effort last night. That team has to be thrilled. And there's another driver that's very happy with his positioning. Carson Kvapil driving for Archie St. Hilaire, Go Fast Racing, in that Keen Parts machine. I think they maybe even surprised themselves with how fast they were last night in qualifying.
Yeah, top 10 qualifier, making his first appearance at the Snowball Derby against this stout field. Still a young driver. He's been garnering plenty of racing experience the last few years. I was kind of surprised he hadn't made the trip for a Derby weekend so far, but he's made the most of it to this point.
Here's one that blew me away. I talked to Travis Kvapil Tuesday night. He never attempted the Snowball Derby, which blows me away.
I talked to Travis a little bit yesterday. A lot of folks in the Junior Motorsports stable, where Carson Kvapil runs on the Cars Tour in the Late Model Stock Series. You know, we talk a lot about Josh Berry and how quickly he has ascended the ranks from, well, initially an iRacer up to late model stocks and now to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. There's a lot of talk, a lot of conjecture about Junior Motorsports fielding a Cup team in the next couple of years. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has said the day we go Cup, Josh Berry goes as our driver. I think you're going to see a very similar path for Carson Kvapil, although I'm not sure they'll take as long to bring him up to the Xfinity Series as they did with Josh Berry, because Carson Kvapil's just knocking him dead everywhere he races.
And Dale Jr.'s tweet last night was something of the nature of Josh Berry as a NASCAR Cup champion, just looking for a team to give him the opportunity to be a championship driver.
You know, that brings up a good point, too. From talking to Eric Jones and William Byron, they said that these super late models correlate way more closer to this new generation Cup car than the old car, as far as some rack and pinion steering, the way that the chassis are. There are actually some things that they've been able to learn as far as the feel of the new generation Cup car from these super late models.
That next-gen car is a good deal more nimble than the car that it replaced. Much better on road courses. It hasn't really shown its mettle on short tracks yet. They're still kind of figuring that one out. But on the mile and a half, which is what NASCAR does the most of, arguably it was what they did worst for many a year. But boy, last year those mile and a half and 2 mile tracks put on some great racing with that new car. And as you said, Alan, this super late model type of automobile is a good deal closer to that than anything we've had before.
I think the neat thing is, and Adam and I have talked about this every year that we've been down here, is, you know, there are a lot of guys that are in both of these races that we're going to watch today that you're going to be calling on Saturday and Sundays in the not-too-distant future. And you think about Chase Elliott and Harrison Burton and Ryan Blaney and Bubba Wall. I mean, you could go through a long list of drivers who were here at the Snowball Derby not that long ago that are going to be – we're going to be seeing the same thing with guys like Jake Garcia and, you know, as you said, Carson Kvapil and some other drivers.
Well, Eric Jones literally got discovered here. Drove around the outside of Kyle Busch to win the Snowball Derby. Kyle went back home and said, man, you got to check this guy out. We need to put him in a race car. And look where he is now, a two-time winner of the Southern 500 at Darlington. You know, John Hunter Nemechek, same path, came down here and got noticed. Obviously, he had the family name. You know, he had the pedigree. But the name alone is not enough. You've got to do something to get people to notice you. And he did here at Five Flags Speedway.
Blaine Rocha watching one of those Christmas paint schemes, Alan, the Horvath Designs best appearing car, one of the candidates there, Blaine Rocha. Right in front of them, the mac and cheese car, the I Heart mac and cheese car of Augie Grill.
Very interesting top five here early in this practice. Jeremy Doss right now with the fastest time. William Byron, Giovanni Ruggiero, you expect that. Hayden Plybon, he was one of the slowest cars yesterday. Right now, fourth quick. And Cole Butcher, the lone Canadian in the field, fifth fastest.
Sixth is Tyler Tanner. Sammy Smith, seventh. Jesse Love is eighth. Hunter Robbins is ninth. And Carson Kvapil, who we've been talking about here, rounds out the top 10 right now. My friends, if you like what you're seeing here, check out our 24-hour streaming channel on connected TVs like LG and Vizio, and streaming apps like Tubby and Zumo, with over 15 hours of live racing every week and original content from the short track and NASCAR racing communities. Racing America is your racing fix at home 24/7 on your TV.
There's just so many people that watch this race, and, you know, I think Dale Earnhardt Jr. and a lot of guys got to know the names Bubba Pollard and Steve and Nancy from the Snowball Derby. And, you know, I think about Ty Majeski, who, with all the championships and all the races he won the Snowball Derby in 2020, and he was a guy we were not sure was going to get that break to go to the next level. He gets in a competitive ride this year, goes out there and wins a couple of races, and I would argue he's the favorite for the championship maybe going into next year.
Definitely agree with that, and it was a matter of time. And Ty Majeski was getting to that point where, is he too old? Is he going to be able to find a ride? And he's not really that old.
They were saying that when he was like 22.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
At the ripe old age of 22. Is he washed up at this
age?
I
know.
But
some of us really old guys a little bit nervous. Sure.
You know, Dave, I know you were around Dale Earnhardt, and he had gotten all the questions about Daytona 500s and when are you ever going to win it. Now Bubba Pollard's kind of in that boat. I think this is his 15th Snowball Derby. His best finish a third. He's had dominant cars and things like that in the past. These drivers have got to get sick of that. I know Dale Earnhardt did. Tony Stewart did, and he never ended up winning the Daytona 500.
Well, it's interesting, and you mentioned Earnhardt. And he was absolutely insistent. I don't worry about race wins. I worry about championships. I got 7 championships. Daytona 500 doesn't matter to me. I want to be the champion at the end of the year. Until he won the Daytona 500, and then he's hugging people he doesn't even know, saying, I want it, I want it, I want it. I think for a lot of these guys, in a way, it's a form of self-preservation to say, I haven't won it, but I don't really care. It's not that important until the day that they do. And I'll tell you what, you want to see a performance, you wait till Bubba Pollard wins the Snowball Derby on Sunday afternoon. That party will rage for weeks.
And the comparison is there because Dale Earnhardt was so good on restrictor plate tracks and so good at Daytona winning shootouts and winning the Gatorade duels and whatever it might be. And then Bubba's the same way. He's won tons of races here. He's just never been able to find the right spot at the end of a race on the Derby to claim the victory.
He was thrilled yesterday to qualify in the 14th position. I talked to him beforehand, and he was really sweating the top 30. He said, I just want to get into that top 30. I just want to avoid, what did he call it, the hooligan race on Saturday. And for him to qualify 14th, he was more than satisfied with that.
It was really amazing to me the change that the track went through last night. Connor O'Crescent goes out there, breaks the rear end. He didn't lay any fluid down on the racetrack, but we were delayed about 10 minutes. And then we just had driver after driver after driver after that go out there and rip fast laps off, and it's really mixed up this running order, and I think played to the detriment for, Derek Griffith, Jesse Love, some of those guys that eventually did end up getting knocked back to the last chance race.
I think Mother Nature tiptoed a really fine line last night. It definitely got cooler, which skyrockets the amount of grip that's available. But what didn't happen, and we've seen it here at the Snowball Derby before, is you get that little dew or that mist or the moisture in the air, and you can see it start to show up on the rear windows of the cars. We never saw that last night. So they got all the grip and none of the water.
Not during qualifying, but I elbowed Adam, and you could see some condensation not long after qualifying in the back of those cars. And we went downstairs. There's a display of some equipment from a local sponsor, and I could just run my hand on the seat of that equipment, and it was totally wet. But as you said, and it seems like the last few years the dew really hasn't
really affected it. Yeah. But it did definitely seem like last night the track got significantly better in the second half of qualifying.
At one point, I think we had three out of the previous 5 time trialers had gone to the top 5 and 2 in a row to the pole. So something definitely happened there after that red flag period that made this track a whole lot better.
See, today's dew point 67.
Well,
I don't even know what that means.
I don't either.
Well, is that good? Is that bad?
So I believe the way it works, if the dew point is higher than the temperature, you get quite a bit of dew.
It's definitely not higher than the temperature today. I can promise you that.
We're safe right now. There's no dew out there.
Yeah.
Michael Simcoe, one of the first-time attendees to the Snowball Derby, did not qualify in last night. He'll be one of the competitors in the last chance showdown. I was looking at the times, and we saw Brad Keselowski in the 6 car on the screen a little bit ago, and he was like 23rd out of 28th in speeds right now. I think he will race well. He's going to start fairly deep in that last chance qualifier field. He's got 50 laps. And Dave, in that race, for 50-lap event, and I know you were here watching it last year, there are a lot of comers and goers even in a 50-lapper. Somebody might go out front, and because this surface is abrasive and it's an older surface and it wears tires, you can be really good for 20 laps, and it looks like you're going to dominate the last chance, and you find yourself in 7th place by lap 30.
First-timers to Five Flag Speedway are famous for that because the green flag flies and they're excited. They want to get to the lead. They want to run away. And you can absolutely do it. And about 3/4 of the field is smart enough to let you do it. And unfortunately, about 30 laps into the run, you begin to pay the price. And by the time you realize the mistake that you've made, you've run the tires off the car and you're just a sitting duck for the rest of the night.
I think Keselowski's going to have to find speed, though. This was the practice a few years ago that Chase Elliott found that speed. So it was not surprising when we went out there. And I'll tell you what else won't be surprising. If that 43 of Derek Thorne's in victory lane tomorrow, he has led 85% of the laps in the last 2 snowball derbies, only to have late race caution comes out and the old chrome horn ease him up out of the way and take away a derby victory from him.
A major upset in qualifying last night. Derek Thorne was no better than second.
I know, it was a shock.
A huge upset and a shock to everybody. But, you know, Derek Thorne has got such a great attitude about it because he has absolutely been moved out of the way the last couple of years. He could just as easily have 2 Snowball Derby wins instead of none. But his attitude, and I love it, is I should have been a car length faster. If I'd been a car length faster, they never would have been able to get to my back bumper, and I would have won those races. I blame myself. It's a refreshing attitude when it's in an era when it's always somebody else's fault.
And I remember one of Derek Thorne's first Snowball Derby starts that we covered on our action down here. He ended up on his roof. So he's come a long way since that first appearance.
And, you know, if you remember back to 2020, the race that Ty Majeski won, it seemed like through the day they kept gaining just a little bit on Derek Thorne. And Derek Thorne said after that race that they got the worst set of tires that they had the entire weekend here, and it ended up showing as Ty Majeski moved him. I thought that was kind of within the lines of racing. Last year, the contact with Chandler Smith, it was maybe a little bit more aggressive. But at the end of the day, Ty Majeski and Chandler Smith have snowball trophies, and Derek Thorne doesn't.
Daniel Dye in the 43 car on the racetrack right now. That's an amazing story. If you could see closely enough on the roof, over the doors, over the windows in that car, doesn't say his name. It says Jessica Kitchens. Jessica Kitchens was a young lady that lost her life to one of, golly, it seems like 100 viruses that are making the rounds of North America these days. She was the granddaughter of former NASCAR racer Jimmy Kitchens, passed away at the age of 14 just a couple of months, a few weeks ago now. And Daniel Dye with the Race to Stop Suicide on the quarter panels of that car, a very worthy endeavor, and also recognizing the late Jessica Kitchens, and that attracted a lot of attention down in the garage this week.
And we've literally seen Daniel grow up. I mean, not only as a person, but as a race car driver. He has come such a long way. Got an ARCA Menard Series East win last year. He was in contention for the ARCA Menard Series points this year, and he's going truck racing in 2023.
You're watching this broadcast on Racing America, and if you're joining us for the first time, there's a whole lot more to see. Log on to racing-america.com to see all your favorite racing news, grassroots live streams from across the country, and behind-the-scenes NASCAR Cup team content. Log on and join our community today, racing-america.com.
Jeremy Doss, 44 car. He qualified in last night. Just made it inside the top 30, and he's the fastest still in practice right now as we have final practice for the super late models of the 55th Snowball Derby, presented by Hooters. William Byron, second quick. Gio Ruggiero, third. Hayden Plybon, fourth. Cole Butcher rounding out the top 5. Tyler Tanner right now sixth. He qualified in last night, too. Another one of those drivers making his debut at the Derby. Sammy Smith, Jesse Love, Hunter Robbins, Carson Quapple rounding out the current top 10.
Now, this one car, Michael House, this is what, the 4th or 5th attempt for him
It is his 4th attempt, and he's had a lot of bad luck here. He has a decent race car.
I thought he was going to get in on time last night. And he
Close.
just missed it, 33rd. And he's going to be one of those borderline guys. I would not be shocked at all to see him race his way in. He's got a good car.
How do you figure these guys slept last night? Knowing
Some very well, some not too good.
What's the old joke? I slept like a baby last night, woke up every 2 hours crying.
Exactly.
Right? And being in those last chance qualifiers, it is not what anybody had in mind when they set out to come down here to Pensacola, Florida earlier this week. But your situation is what it is, and you've got to make the most of it. And he's got, like you said, he's got a pretty good race car. He's not far off right now.
What an opportunity for Stephen Nasse coming into this weekend. He won his 2nd Winchester 400 in that car, number 51. He won the All-American 400 back a couple of weeks after that. He is vying to become the first driver to ever win those 2 events and the Snowball Derby in the same year. I was really shocked that nobody else has done it, but that just tells you how tough it is to put it all together for those 3 races.
Was anybody surprised that he struggled in qualifying? That's kind of been his M.O. here at the Snowball Derby. Not the first time at all to see him relegated outside the top 30. He won't have to run the last chance race. We talked about that a little bit earlier. He gets one of the promoter's options in the 31st and 32nd positions, but he's always just so much better on race day than he is on qualifying day. I don't think even he knows why.
Yeah, and the year that he crossed the line first in the Derby a few years ago, the win was taken away because of the brake issue that they had found in tech. That year he started at the back of the field, as we talked about last night. So no big surprise. He will race well in a 300-lap race. Not a big issue.
We're getting a report from Ryan that Bubba is making some adjustments on his machine, Bubba Pollard, that is. For more, let's go down to Ryan and check out what's going on with Bubba Pollard.
Down to the attention of the pit crew, put it on jack stand. A notebook went immediately inside the driver's compartment of Pollard. The hood came off, the crew went to work and changed front shocks on this number 26 car. And now they are finishing up their final touches, but Bubba obviously not happy with the handling of his number 26 car right now.
Well, you got to remember, right now it's 1:30 Central Time. We're going to be racing at this time tomorrow afternoon under similar conditions. I think it's going to be a little bit cooler, but now you're starting to see getting away from that short run speed, trying to get that long run speed, and Bubba Pollard's trying to see what works and doesn't work.
Bubba no better than 15th fastest on the pylon right now, so they've got a little work to do on that machine as well. There's Derek Griffith, the youngster out of Hudson, New Hampshire. I got a soft spot for that town. That's my neck of the woods up there in northern New England.
That's what I hear.
Hudson, New Hampshire is the home to a very neat little racetrack, the Hudson Speedway. It is, shall we say, rustic, all right? Not real fancy, Hudson Speedway. And it's also the hometown of my favorite race car driver when I was growing up, and my dear friend today, Dynamite Dave Dion and the Dion Brothers Racing Team out of Hudson, New Hampshire. This is the next generation of Hudson, New Hampshire race car drivers in Derek Griffith.
And this one's a pretty good one. We
Real
were kind of
good
surprised to not see him lock in last night.
He was close.
Yeah, very close. Going to be starting from the pole of that last chance qualifier this afternoon. Probably the favorite between he and Jesse Love on that front row. But that's going to be fun. I mean, we do look at that field. Going to have close to 20 cars or so in that starting field for a 50-lap race, and the talent, the champions, the big-time race winners that we will see racing in that qualifier. Eric Henefeld standing by down to the pits for practice, final practice for the super late models. Eric?
Yeah, I was listening to you guys a little bit earlier, and Alan was talking about finding speed in this session, i.e. Brad Keselowski needs to find a little speed to get into the Derby in the last chance later. I'm looking at the rundown right now. Hayden Clivon, the Washington native, is fourth. He's probably ran as many practice laps as anybody in the last couple of days. They've found some speed. You were just talking, Adam, about Jesse Love. He's in the top 10 in this session, and he obviously, as you mentioned, got to race his way in. He's there a little bit too.
Absolutely. As there you see William Byron obviously wasn't necessarily satisfied with his second fast lap during this practice earlier as they work on the long run stuff, make some adjustments and see if they can keep that speed for a little longer during the runs.
You know, the neat thing we were talking about Derek Griffith and we were hearing about Hayden Plybon. With this race being in December, it's really the only pavement race in the country where you get guys from all four corners of the country, from Florida to Maine to Washington to California and everywhere in between. And it's really neat to just see these drivers learn each other's styles, because a lot of times this is the only time that they're ever going to race against each other.
Makes things a little more volatile, too, because when you haven't raced against anyone, a certain driver before, A, you don't know what to expect out of him, and B, you don't maybe have the same level of respect for him as somebody that you would for somebody that you've run a number of races against over the years. And, you know, when you get the West Coast guys and the Southeast guys and the New England guys and even a handful of Canadian guys coming down across the border, it can be a little bit volatile, especially when you get late in a race with a lot on the line.
And they all race different. You know, that's the thing. You know, I'll talk to these different drivers, and there's a way guys from New England race, and there's a way guys from the South race. There's a way that guys in the Midwest race, and a way that guys in Wisconsin race that is even a little bit off from what other Midwestern drivers' styles are.
There was Derek Kraus, 7 starts in the Snowball Derby. He's yet to lock in to this one. He's going to be starting from about 5th position later today, trying to lock in. He came down as a 14-year-old and has qualified into the last 7 Snowball Derbies.
He is a veteran at a very young age. There's no question about that. Alan, I want to follow up on what you were talking about the different driving styles, or at least the perception of different driving styles from different parts of the country. And I've heard this for a long time, that the Michigan drivers, the upper Midwest drivers, that it's, for lack of a better term, a cleaner style of racing, that people don't get moved out of the way as often up in that part of the country as they do here in the Southeast. I don't know if it's true or not, but the reputation is certainly accepted as being true.
Well, I think, you know, in the Southeast, you've got a lot of young drivers that come along, and they're coming straight out of Legends cars, and they're used to that type of racing. And also, they're not necessarily paying the bills on some of those cars. The other thing is I remember the first time I ever called a pass race at Hickory back in 2006, there were about 10 guys from Maine that came down, and I said, these Southern guys are going to wipe the floor with these guys from Maine. Well, that was the last time I ever said that. And I talked to some of those guys, and I said, why are y'all so good at these racetracks that you don't run at down south? And they said, which you're going to appreciate this and why we are going to like these last chance races, we heat race. We are used to not starting in the top 10 every race. We're used to starting outside the top 25. We're used to taking our time to work up towards the front. So, I mean, for no other reason, that is what, at least to me, lends itself to why these drivers, you know, tend to drive the way that they do in these certain regions.
It's fascinating the way different things are accepted as the norm. Up in New England, nobody bats an eye at having to run heat races to get yourself qualified. Down here in the Southeast, man, you can make some of these guys heat race at gunpoint. They're just not going to jeopardize their equipment in that way.
And they don't like it. I mean, again, going back to those past days, they tried to run those early shows back in 2006, like they do up north, and run heat races. And the Southern guys absolutely would not have any part of it. And it's just, I remember talking to the New England guys, and they think it's kind of funny whenever they come down and qualify, because they're like, we go out there for 2 laps, this is nuts.
Practice continues. Jeremy Doss still quickest in the 44. He said that very early. See a lot of laps being turned. In the previous sessions we saw yesterday, you would see 6, 7, 8 laps maybe in each session. They were working on qualifying. Now you see drivers turning 38 laps, 32 laps, 29 laps. They're working on the longer runs, trying to fine-tune them, keep that long-range speed.
And the goal here is not necessarily to find speed. They'll take it if they can find it. But if you look at the top 20 right now, there's not been any significant movement. The first few laps have been the fastest. Everybody just kind of slotted in where they slotted in, and nobody's moved significantly up or down in the last 25 or 30 laps. What these drivers are learning, though, is how their car is going to react over a long run tomorrow afternoon.
And there's one that reacted real well on a short run last night. The pole sitter for the Derby, Josh Berry. How will it work on a long run. Right now, Josh Berry in the 26 car.
He's
listed down the list in 18th, but that's really not a major concern, I wouldn't think.
Well, look how many laps he's practiced. He's practiced 46 laps. And based on what I'm looking through here, I believe that's more laps than anybody else that's practiced. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Second most to Noah Gregson. Noah has turned 47. They both turned 47 laps, so they are definitely working on some long runs.
It's going to be interesting to see these NASCAR drivers that come in. Obviously, they get a lot of attention, they get a lot of publicity, and a lot of headlines. I don't really see or feel or hear down there the tension between the quote-unquote big-time NASCAR guys. There's no resentment among the super late model regulars to them being here, and I think it comes from the fact that the vast majority of them started right here.
Ryan McCullough, one of our Pepper Jack Kennels pit reporters, was standing down in the pits. Ryan, what you got?
Well, we just talked to Bubba Pollard, just talked about Bubba Pollard making a shock change. I was wandering my way down pit road, came across another driver making a shock change. Noah Gregson's team now thrashing under the hood, changing shocks, searching for grip. Noah was looking at the cell phone inside the car to try to see where he stacked up on the time sheet. Apparently they did not like where they were, so we're going to go search for more out of this number 30 car.
How good is Noah Gregson for the sport, Dave? I mean, is he not a refreshing change of pace?
He absolutely is. And every once in a while someone will tell me, well, you know, the NASCAR drivers, the big-time NASCAR drivers just don't have any personality anymore. They're all corporate. They're all, you know, they never say anything controversial. They never do anything wrong. I said, you've met Noah Gregson, right? You've heard of Noah Gregson. Hey, I love the kid because, I mean, let's just call it like it is. He's a little goofy, right? He can drive a race car like there's no tomorrow, and he wins a lot of races, won 8 times in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But when he gets out of the race car, you have no idea what's about to come out of his mouth at any moment in time. I love the kid.
And he's kind of like, and I know it's a guy he looks up to, but he's kind of like a Tim Richmond sort. He's a heck of a race car driver, but he's got his own personality, and he's unapologetic for it. And, you know, I heard a couple of times here, once it was announced that he was going to Petty GMS, you know, pairing him with Eric Jones, I think is a very good thing. And I think that the two of those drivers are going to be able to work really well with each other, despite the fact that they have totally opposite personalities.
I like the fact that's to say the least. Totally opposite personalities. Eric Jones is very quiet, very understated. Noah's just the opposite of those two things. And I like the fact that they're going to, my prediction is they're going to push each other, because nobody wants to be the second best driver in their own team, right? What's the old saying? If you're not the lead dog, the view never changes.
True.
Noah Gregson does not want to be outrun by Eric Jones next year, and Eric Jones certainly doesn't want the rookie to come in and outrun him. So I think they're going to push each other to great things with an organization that is just about ready now to step up and become a frequent contender for wins.
And I think this driver is too. Corey Jaime is coming off the championship, or the rookie championship, and can we say Craftsman Truck Series now?
Yes.
Is officially Craftsman Truck Series. They had a couple of wins in that series last year, and I think it could be a really, really big year for Corey Haim with Toyota, and I would not be surprised to see him run really well here tomorrow.
He has the full and unqualified support of Toyota and TRD. I've had a number of conversations with David Wilson, the president of TRD, and they are so high on Corey Haim. They see him, I almost said, as a star of the future. I'm not sure he's not a star already, but he's just going to get bigger. His star is on the rise, and Toyota, they have big plans for that young man in the next few years.
I've seen him fast in just about everything he's driven from the time I saw him at a pro late model the first time at the World Series maybe 5 years ago. Didn't know who he was, looked it up real quick to see where he came from, the legend car ranks, and definitely has turned a lot of heads since then, won a lot of races.
There's the 35 of Jake Garcia, last year's Southern Super Series and Blizzard Series champion. Started off hot here at the Snowball Derby, and just as it was either his first or second start, and he ended up finishing second back in 2019. Seen him in some truck races this season. Think we're going to see him a lot more in 2023.
He hasn't quite been able to equal that success of the first time around, but he's not far off either.
No.
I mean, whenever that 35 car shows up in the pit area, you know that he's going to be a contender. I'll tell you what, there's a pretty good grouping right there. That's a pretty good 3-car grouping. If you could take those 3 against the field tomorrow, you might want to put $20 down.
Yeah, I think any 3 of those, Cole Butcher, Jake Garcia, or Carson Quapple, could, end up being contenders. And, the other thing that we forget as you see these 2 cars pulling away from Carson Quapple, again, these teams are on all sorts of different strategies. Some with new tires, some with old tires, some with, long run speed, some that are just getting out there. So, that's why you may see a little bit of a speed discrepancy. We're happy to provide you this sneak peek into some of the events here at Five Flags Speedway this weekend during Snowball Derby weekend. Weekend's main events are available on a pay-per-view basis at RacingAmerica.com. In order to watch Snowflake 100 and the Snowball Derby, log on to RacingAmerica.com. Purchase your pay-per-view today.
This practice session for the super late models of the Snowball Derby, presented by Hooters, scheduled to go until 1:45 Central Time. We're less than 5 minutes away from the original scheduled end of this practice session. It's been a busy practice session, one of the busiest, I would say, that we've seen because they're turning more laps when they're on track.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And as you said, with those earlier practices, you go out there and you lay a couple of laps down, and it never seems like you get more than, maybe 7 or 8 cars at a time out there. And there may be 20 cars at least out there on the racetrack right now.
Much similar to actual race conditions, much more similar to what we're going to see here tomorrow afternoon in the main event. Got to be able to negotiate some traffic, got to be able to find your way either around somebody or underneath somebody exiting those corners. Jesse Love in the 21 car, Daniel Dye in the 43 car, and I think they got Augie Grill for company back there right behind them in that 3rd spot.
I think I know you can combine their age, and he's older.
Yeah,
by about 10 years. Let's check in now with Ryan McCullough, our Pepperjack Kettles pit reporter. He's with our fastest car on track.
Yeah, Jeremy Dawson is the fastest guy in town right now. Now, we're down here in turn 1 where it's super loud right here when we get back on the gas. But Jeremy, talking about your race car right now, you're really, really quick.
Honestly, it's hard to hear you, but we stayed here last night, working really hard. I think we're the last car in the pits. Got to hand it off to all these guys back here. They made their car really good since P1. Very happy with it in race trip. So I think we got a good hot rod for tomorrow.
You come down here and you practice on Saturday afternoon in the heat of the day. Is that kind of like the prep work or the real involved practice zone that you race about the same time tomorrow on Sunday? Just too loud down here, but we've got some good thoughts from Jeremy Dodd.
It is quite loud down there. We can hear quite well in the tower. Pretty much soundproof up here, Alan, but down there on pit road, you've been down there for that. Pretty tough to hear the questions there as you see Sammy Smith in the 22. Johnny Clark, one of the Horvath Design best appearing car competitors there in the 54.
And we talked about Bubba Pollard. Johnny Clark was the same way with the Oxford 250. He had probably ran in it, 15, 16 years before he ever won it. And as you said, he kind of downplayed it, but then you see him in victory lane, and they look like different people after the race.
Johnny Clark is not the most demonstrative guy on the planet, for sure. He just kind of goes about his business, but he chased his dad chased the Oxford 250 for 20 years before Johnny ever climbed behind the wheel of the race car. Of course, his father, the famous Farmington Flyer out of Farmington, Maine, Billy Clark. Johnny took over the wheels of the family race car, chased it for a long, long time as well. And man, when you get after something for 20 or 25 years in the family and you finally get it done, that's a big day.
And Eddie Mercer, Adam, was the same way here. He had ran, and his dad, they had came here forever trying to win. He qualified on the front row 6 times and was finally able to do it in 2005. And it's nice to see those stories as we take a look again at Brad Keselowski and see if he's picked it up any on the timesheets. And they're still struggling for speed. I think the car's got pretty good handling, but just not very fast. Right now, 34 of how many cars have been on
50,
track?
34th out of 50. So still looking for speed. It's just about how that car will stay. If it's got a good handle, it might not drop off like some of the others in his last chance qualifier this afternoon. At least that's what the team and his fans are hoping for.
It's definitely been a bit of a surprise. That's essentially the Fury race car's house car that Brad Keselowski's running. Now, he doesn't have a lot of experience, doesn't have any experience really here at Five Flags Speedway. And in talking to a number of drivers yesterday, Evan Shotko, the youngster out of Michigan, said he gained almost a tenth of a second per lap yesterday just by watching someone with experience and following their line into turn number one. Varied his line by maybe the half a width of a race car going into turn one and found almost a tenth of a second. Maybe Brad needs to follow somebody.
Always a good idea. And I did see him yesterday get behind, and I don't know if it was Derek Thorne, it was Ty Majeski. It was one of the guys you would expect to want to run a similar line, because there's some of the best that do it here. As we're down to the final couple minutes here in this practice session for the super late models, you see Daniel Dye rolling around the bottom lane.
That 22 car could be a dark horse pick. Not necessarily coming into the weekend would Sammy Smith be a dark horse as well as he and that team have ran. But whenever you look at it, he's 28. He did get locked in. He's going to have to work his way up. But you were telling us yesterday that's the chassis that Chandler Smith drove here last year, albeit with a lot of different modifications and stuff to it. But you just cannot count out these Donnie Wilson Motorsports cars.
There's Bubba Pollard back out on the racetrack after that shock absorber change, showing some pretty good speed, trying to get himself a little bit closer to the top of the pylon, or perhaps best, just like the feel of the race car a little better.
I think at this point they look for that feel. If it feels good for 10 laps, you know you've got a pretty good race car. If it feels good for a lap or two and then you don't like what it's doing, you might want to go back to the drawing board. And right there, he was able to scoot by some pretty fast race cars. Austin Nason, one of those who qualified in the top 10 of the 14.
Bubba Pollard 15th on the board right now. Has picked up a couple of spots since making that shock change. Not at all happy with the way things felt early on. Took a little bit of time out of this practice to make some changes under the hood and under the rear end of that car, and has found a little bit more speed here late in the session.
Here's maybe the biggest surprise. That car number 44, Connor Jones. He's a rookie. He comes out of Virginia. That's late model stock country. But he's paired up with Derek Thorne, and Derek is literally mentoring him as a driver, but also working on his car. He qualified outside the top 30 on his first lap last night, shot up to what, I think it was second, and he ended up third overall.
He's got his eye, I'm sure. There's a $10,000 bonus if a first-time visitor to Five Flags Speedway can win this race tomorrow. The Welcome to Pensacola bonus could boost the total winnings for a winner. Now, granted, it's going to be really difficult to lead flag tomorrow, and there's a lot of lap money to try for. It could be, if a first-time winner takes the checkered flag tomorrow, a $55,000 payday.
Yeah, I mean, you got that opportunity to win over $50,000, which is just wild.
All right, the checkered flag has flown. Final practice complete for the Snowball Derby. We'll take a break. Back with more after this.
You're watching the Snowball Derby on Racing America.
Hooters and racing go together like killer wings and ice-cold beer. Racing has been at the core of Hooters' DNA from the beginning. Whether it's backing the best drivers or serving up the best food on race day, race fans know Hooters is the real deal. Big screens, great food, good times. Hooters, the official home of race fans.
The debut of the NASCAR Cup Series at Worldwide Technology Raceway in 2022 was nothing short of spectacular. 3 incredible days of fun. The Confluence Music Festival with some of the biggest stars on the planet. A pre-race spectacular like no other. A packed house of enthusiastic fans. And now it's time to plan on making it even bigger and better in 2023. It's more than just a race. It's a festival of epic proportions.
The Enjoy Illinois 300, presented by Ticket Smarter. A fun-filled, family-friendly midway with music, games, interactive displays, and the greatest food selection in sports.
NASCAR Weekend returns June 2nd through the 4th, 2023.
Just 5 minutes from downtown St. Louis in Madison, Illinois.
It's go time!
SRI Performance and Stock Car Steel are your all-inclusive motorsports warehouses with more than 450 product lines. They have everything to put you in victory lane, from professional racing to street performance. SRI and Stock Car Steel have you covered with leading brands as well as a large selection of steel, aluminum, and plastics. With locations in North Carolina and Indiana, access has never been easier. SRI has the world's largest inventory of used parts. SRI Performance and Stock Car Steel and Aluminum, your one-stop shops for everything racing.
Five Flag Speedway, Pensacola, Florida. Dave Moody, Alan Dietz, Adam Mackey, Ryan McCulloch, and Eric Hunefeld down on pit road. Final practice complete for the super late model division. Their last chance to tune it up, at least those that aren't in the last chance qualifier later this afternoon, for tomorrow's Snowball Derby here at Five Flag Speedway.
Following Doss, it was Byron, Ruggiero, Plybon. That's the big one right there in the fourth spot. He's going to try to come through that last chance qualifier.
Yep.
And Cole Butcher rounding out the top 5 in the practice times there for the super late models.
Yep, Tyler Tanner, Sammy Smith, Jesse Love, Hunter Robbins, and Carson Wobble, the top 10. So you got a couple of guys there in Hayden Plybon and Jesse Love that are going to be in that last chance race, and see if that translates to that here a little bit later on.
All right, we are going to bow out momentarily. We invite you to join us on pay-per-view as the activities continue here at Five Flag Speedway in Pensacola, Florida, as we prepare for tomorrow afternoon's 55th annual renewal of the Snowball Derby.
This copyrighted telecast may not be reproduced, retransmitted, or used in any form without the authorized written consent of Racing America. We hope you enjoyed today's broadcast.